Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Learn with me. I'm Deborah Hanson. Today, we're going to be looking at AP Psychology 5.3, explaining and classifying psychological disorders. We're going to look at in this video at the key terms only. So definition, example, like I've always done in all the units that we've done so far, I always do the key terms separately and then the CD questions with the essential knowledge. These are simply the key terms. So if you want to see the slideshows for all the key terms, all the essential knowledge, all the CDs, you'll find the link below in the description to my Teacher Pay Teacher store where you can get the slideshows, the workbook, the teacher notes, the study notes, everything you need to know, or everything that I talk about on the channel to be able to study for your final or your unit test, whatever you need. And just before we get started, thank you so much to everybody who subscribed to the channel. Really appreciate it. It's great to see the numbers going up. So if you haven't done so already, please hit that like and subscribe button for me. It really does help me a lot. Okay, let's get started on the key terms for 5.3. So there are a lot of them. Now, I mean, we're not going to mince words here. I mean, we know there's a lot of key terms for AP psychology. When my students ask me, should I take AP Psych next year? I always say to them, just be prepared to memorize a lot of key terms because you really do need to know the key terms to be able to apply them on test day. So it's really about being able to apply them. So it's not just about knowing the definition, but get some examples so that you can apply them when you get those FRQs or even MCQs on test day. Okay, let's get started with. So we'll start with psychological disorder. The definition is a syndrome characterized by clinically significant disturbances in cognition, emotion regulation, or behavior that reflects dysfunction. So the example is major depressive disorder, which involves persistent feelings of sadness and loss of interest. Oops. Okay. The next one is the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. Right now we're at the DSM-5. That's the fifth sort of like revision of it. So we refer to it, you'll see it in your MCQs and things like that as DSM-5. So the definition is a manual created by the American Psychiatric Association used to classify and diagnose psychological disorders. For example, major depressive disorder, which involves persistent feelings of sadness and loss of interest. The ICD, the International Classification of Diseases. So the definition is a classification system developed by the World Health Organization to diagnose and track diseases and disorders globally. So the ICD-11 includes mental health and behavioral health categories. Biopsychosocial Model. So, this is a framework suggesting that biological, psychological, and sociocultural factors contribute to the development of psychological disorders. So, for example, depression can result from genetic predisposition, which is your biological, your negative thought patterns, which is your psychological, sorry, and financial stress, which is your social cultural. The diathesis stress model. The definition is a theory that psychological disorders develop when a genetic vulnerability, a diathesis, is triggered by environmental stressors. So, for example, a person predisposed to anxiety might develop a disorder after a traumatic event. Stigma. This is the negative attitudes or beliefs about individuals with psychological disorders, often leading to discrimination or social exclusion. So, avoiding someone with schizophrenia due to the misconception about their behavior. Cultural norms. This is shared expectations and rules within a society about acceptable behavior which influence the classifications of disorders. So, for example, hearing voices might be considered a disorder in one culture, but a spiritual experience in another. Maladaptive behavior. These are the actions or tendencies that interfere with daily functioning or well being. So, for example, avoiding all social interactions due to anxiety. Distress. Emotional suffering experienced by an individual, often a criterion for diagnosing a psychological disorder. For example, constant worry that interferes with sleep and relationships. Deviation from social norms. This is behaviors that significantly differ from societal expectations and may indicate a psychological disorder. For example, excessive aggression in social settings. Dysfunction. The definition is impairment in daily functioning due to a psychological disorder. For example, the inability to maintain employment due to depression. Evidence-based diagnostic tools. The definition is scientifically validated methods used to diagnose psychological disorders. For example, structured clinical interviews and standardized questionnaires. Positive consequences of diagnosis. For example, the definition is the benefits such as access to treatment and understanding one's condition. Example, receiving therapy and medication for bipolar disorder after an accurate diagnosis. Negative consequences of diagnosis. The definition, challenges such as stigma, misdiagnosis, or labeling effects. So, for example, being unfairly labeled as difficult due to a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. Cultural relativity. The definition is the principle that cultural context should be considered when diagnosing psychological disorders. So, for example, recognizing cultural differences in expressing grief. And we've talked about this before when we did, I think it was in Unit 4. Ethics in diagnostics. Ensuring that diagnostic practices are fair, unbiased, and respect cultural diversity. For example, avoiding overdiagnosis of ADHD in minority populations due to cultural biases. Comorbidity. This is the occurrence of two or more disorders in the same individual. So, for example, a person who has anxiety and depression often occur together. Prognosis. This is the likely course of outcome of a psychological disorder. So, many individuals with major depressive disorder recover with treatment. Prevalence. This is the percentage of a population that is affected by a specific disorder at a given time. So many individuals with major depressive disorder recover with treatment. Etiology. This is the study of the causes of origins of psychological disorders. So researching how genetic and environmental factors contribute to schizophrenia. Okay, let's go through our list again like we always do. Check your cards if you've made your cards or your notes, or just pause the video and see if you remember the definition and the example for each of these words. Like I said, it is really important for you to know these words so that you can apply them. Okay, psychological disorder, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And like we said, it was the DSM-5 now. Biopsychosocial Model, diathesis stress model, stigma, cultural norms, maladaptive behavior, distress, deviation from social norms, dysfunction, evidence-based diagnostic tools, positive consequences of diagnosis, negative consequences of diagnosis, cultural relativity, ethics in diagnosis, comorbidity, prognosis, prevalence, etiology. Okay, and that was the key terms for 5.3 AP Psychology. Hope you found that helpful. If you did, hit that like and subscribe button for me. I really appreciate it. And like I said, if you want to see all of the content that goes with Unit 5, just check the link below to my Teacher TV Teacher Store, where you can see all the slideshows and everything you'll need. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. See you next time.